It appears the Supreme Court has once again gutted voting rights. So now this was a 6-3 vote with the conservative majority that voted all along ideological lines. They found that Arizona's new restrictive voting laws were totally fine, didn't violate any section of the Voting Rights Act, specifically Section 2. So now, overall, the court basically sided in favor of laws that would ban ballot harvesting, as well as one law that allows the state to throw out any ballots cast in the wrong precinct. So now a federal appeals court had previously struck down both of those provisions in Arizona, ruling that they had an unequal impact on minority voters and that there was no evidence of fraud that would have justified their use. So, of course, that's the argument that you hear from conservatives. Hey, oh, look at a massive voter fraud. That's why, well, we have to, we have to pass all these laws that to prevent the fraud. Yeah, okay. And so the Supreme Court ended up reinstating these state laws, declaring that unequal impact on minorities in this context was relatively minor, that other states have similar laws, and that the states don't have to wait for fraud to occur before enacting laws to prevent it. So understand, conservatives can make up a situation where they think, oh my God, this person could possibly do voter fraud. Therefore, we are now going to pass a law based on that assumption that somebody's going to use this to be able to do voter fraud, even though we have no evidence of voter fraud or this being used to do voter fraud. We're going to pass these laws anyway. And if they happen to affect the black population in any of the states that we do it, or the minority population, well, sad day for them. I mean, golly gee, who would have seen that one coming, right? Writing the dissent, Justice Elena Kagan accused the majority of, quote, yet again rewriting the Voting Rights Act, a law, she noted, designed to bring about the end of discrimination in voting. Honestly, the Voting Rights Act hasn't been the same since Section 5 was gutted years ago. But here's what she wrote. Never before has a statute done more to advance the nation's highest ideals. Few laws are more vital in the current moment, yet in the last decade, this court has treated no statute worse. As I mentioned, Section 5 required state and local governments with a history of racial discrimination in voting to get approval from the Justice Department for any changes, any laws in voting procedures. That was something that was incredibly important because, as we saw, as soon as these Section 5 was struck down, you had all of these new voter ID laws. You had all this new, voter restrictions on voting. When that provision was struck down, as NPR explains, the only protections for voting rights that remained in the law were Section 2. Now all that's left is the section banning vote dilution in redistricting based on race. So why does this matter if, according to the majority, this only played a minor role? Well, NPR continues to explain, though Section 2 has largely been used to prevent minority vote dilution and redistricting, importantly, it does bar voting procedures that result in a denial or abridgment of the right of any citizen of the United States to vote on account of race or color. So the Arizona case was viewed as particularly important because it was the first time the court dealt with the claim of vote denial under Section 2 and how to evaluate it. Kagan wrote in her dissent, this court has no right to remake Section 2. Maybe some think that vote suppression is a relic of history. And so the need for a potent Section 2 has come and gone. But Congress gets to make that call. Because it has not done so, the court's duty is to apply the law as it is written. The law is not the law that confronted one of the country's most enduring wrongs, pledged to give every American of every race an equal chance to participate in our democracy, and now stands as the crucial tool to achieve that goal. That law of all laws deserves the sweep and power Congress gave it. That law of all laws should not be diminished by this court. Now, again, that's the dissent. Unfortunately, we have a conservative Supreme Court. Turns out elections do have consequences. I'm just saying. Voter suppression is not over. Just like racism isn't over. What we have are Republican governors that do not want to lose. And Republican governments all over the country, local governments, as well as Senate seats, House seats. You have Republicans that don't want to lose. And so they target voting. So they target minority neighborhoods. So they target traditionally Democratic voters, the poor, the elderly, students. And they do this. And by the way, these laws are not there to combat fraud. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals had ruled previously that there was actually no record of fraud, and that there was evidence these two provisions ended up denying many minorities the right to vote. The appeals court noted, for instance, the ballot collectors were needed in some large rural and remote parts of the state. It pointed, for instance, to the Navajo Nation, an area the size of West Virginia, where there are few post offices or postal routes, and where people without cars often have no way to send their ballots without collectors picking them up. And that's why ballot harvesting is important. Where you have to have people to collect these ballots from people who can't make it to the polls, or who can't, make it, deliver those ballots. That's why it's important. But again, this isn't about fraud, because there is no voter fraud. There never was massive voter fraud. This is all about denying people their right to vote, their right to be able to be involved in the political process. In fact, GOP lawyers kind of outed themselves. Mask off. They admitted during the oral arguments of the case that the Republican legislators' motive in enacting the Arizona voting restrictions was less anti-fraud and more political. Quote, not having such restrictions puts us at a competitive disadvantage, lawyer Michael Carvin said on behalf of the Republican Party. Politics is a zero-sum game, and every law they get through in unlawful interpretations of Section 2 hurts us. Now, they say it's unlawful because they have to make that argument. But notice what they're saying. Yeah, the more people vote, the less chance we have of winning. So, of course, we have to put this stuff, these barriers up, because we're not popular. Our policies are not popular. We are, our party is basically hinging on white grievance. This is what we run our entire election strategy on. White grievance, fear of black people, fear of immigrants, fear, fear, fear. That's really what it's all about. And obviously, that doesn't resonate with the American people. Not only that, but of course, look at their policy positions. Tax cuts for the rich, deregulation. That's really all they run on. The Republican Party right now is a massive money funneling scheme to wealthy corporations. And they use racism and bigotry in order to entice people, as well as voter suppression and gerrymandering, to keep the kind of voters that they don't want going to the polls home. And that's what it's all about. They cheat. This is cheating. Understand. By denying people the ability to vote, you are cheating in these elections. So again, you have the poor, disabled, black people, Democrats, anybody that they believe is not going to vote for them, they're going to deny their right to vote so that they themselves can hold on to power. This is what Paul Weyrich, the godfather of the modern conservative movement, so famously said in his Goo Syndrome speech. He said, quote, I don't want everybody to vote. Our leverage in the elections quite candidly goes up as the voting populace goes down. Understand that if you actually believe that Republicans care about voting in democracy and integrity, you're either lying or you just haven't been paying attention to what's actually going on. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel. by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.